best tools to use is actually a discussion forum. It's on Blackboard. Now, sorry, just one of them, I'll take this. It's on Blackboard available. The key thing that happens with discussion forums, so this is how it looks on Blackboard. You put a question, so the question is, what is educational psychology? This is just a sample. And then every student has an answer, and every student can reply to each other. Every student can quote the answer of somebody. And what happens is that Blackboard gives you some software statistics tool about how many students responded, how many responses they had, what was the number of words, and so forth. The thing when you develop a discussion, and these are guidelines for you, when you start thinking of integrating discussion forums, is actually, yes, if you don't mind, is actually to think about the right question to ask. What are the guidelines? Are you going to be grading it or no? If you're grading it, what is the rubric to grade it? Blackboard allows you to create an online rubric for every discussion forum. And this rubric, it's really you as a professor. It's the same thing as you would do in a traditional discussion. So what do you want to assess? The rubric can be based on quantitative data, like the number of words, the number of responses, but it can be also qualitative data, like the value of the quality of the argument, the references that the students have used, the way they were able to justify, or their writing style. So all of this can be done completely online on Blackboard. The one thing that happens with professors is that they consider discussion forum on the top of what the student do. It doesn't work. It has to be built in as one of the assignments or one of the assessment questions. If you come and tell them it's luxury, they will not do it. And this is why it's important when you start structuring your discussion forum and you put the question, tell the student this links to course learning outcome 3, 5, 7, whatever it is. You might have a discussion that goes over 3 days. You might have an a discussion that spans over a whole week. It's really dependent on you. You set up this. It's only clicks. You decide whether you want students to moderate or you want to moderate. You decide how long you want to keep it. But you have to put expectations. Like you say, every student is expected to have at least one contribution of 200 words. And another contribution, which is a reply of at least 100 words. You don't leave it open that the student can answer only saying, yes, I agree, no, I disagree. You have to put the guidelines and the expectation. And this sheet here is really giving you some guidelines about when you think of starting a discussion on Blackboard or Moodle or D2L or whatever you're using as a learning management system, there are important things you should consider. But think of it as part of your learning and teaching, not an add-on to students, because they will not use it. Now, the key in discussions is to ask the right question. There are multiple types of questions, as I told you when we were talking about fishbowl and jigsaw and case study analysis. These are all examples where you pedagogically can use a discussion forum. I gave a student half-an-hour video. I don't have time to discuss it in the class and so forth. I put a questions related on the discussion forum. The students start answering. Everybody's putting an answer. I come and I see the flow. I throw another question so that I can stimulate the student thinking. It's what you would actually do in a normal setting, but you're only doing it online. You've done a jigsaw technique, or you've done a fishbowl. The observation, I don't have time to hear from the 30 students who were observing in the classroom. Every student can put their contribution on the discussion forum. So that's one use of the discussion forum. Whether you want to grade it or not, if you're giving a grade for participation, you might want to consider this. Sometimes what happens is that you start 6 discussions, but you only grade 3. But you don't tell the students which are the 3 ones that you're grading, because you want them to seriously work on the assignment. When your students become familiar, you might use some of your students as moderators. You know, you have A students always, or students. So you might get the students to moderate to reduce the workload on you. But they have to first be familiar with using discussion forums. Every discussion forum, you can create a rubric. This is from Blackboard. It's a snapshot from Blackboard. You can create the rubric completely online. You don't have to give any paper thing. I have a discussion. It's going to be evaluated. This is the rubric. I know as a student how I'm going to be evaluated. Now, it's important to read these guidelines if you wanted to implement discussion forum. When you have a discussion, at the end of the discussion when it's over, you have to wrap it up. You have to summarize what were the main highlights of the discussion, what were the key learning things. You don't leave a discussion open to students. It's important that you make sure that everybody is focused, everybody is on time, and that you evaluate it. You will see as a professor, the first time maybe you will practice it, it will not go very well. But the second, third, fourth time, it will actually improve. An alternative to discussion forums are blogs. It's also on Blackboard. You don't have to get any open source. Do you know what a blog is? I'm sure you heard about people who became very famous bloggers. There are blogs for everything today. Blogs for cooking, and blogs for traveling, and blogs for fashion, and some people are really making lots of money. I decided to become a blogger myself. I was joking. What a blog is a website. It's a website that is created where you can write up about what you do during the day, you can put photos, you can put videos, and so lots of people who do traveling, they maintain a website where they write on a daily basis what they have done, they take screenshots, they take Snapchats, they upload stuff, and so forth. For educational purposes, a blog is used mainly to document student learning, which means that you can maintain 3 types of blogs in Blackboard. One is that you have a blog for your course. So as a professor, you create a sub-site if you want for your course, and you upload material, you upload videos, and then other students can put their comments, and they can actually, rate what you have uploaded and so forth. The second thing is that you can ask students to maintain individual blogs. Remember when I told you about group projects, and I told you have to evaluate the process and the product? One way of evaluating the process is that you tell the students who's doing an internship or a graduate capstone project or doing a major project is to maintain a weekly entry to a blog. So every student as an individual has their own blog, and they register. It's like a journal. Remember how in the past, especially the girls, we used to have these journals and put pictures and write what we have done during the day? It's the same thing, but it's electronic. You don't have to be a programmer to create this website. So you ask the student, if a student is doing an internship, you ask the student, instead of giving you papers and so forth, you ask them every week to reflect on what they have learned, to write up what they have done, their experience, and so forth. You might also use in Blackboard a group blog. You have a group of students, 5 students working in the project, you create a blog for them. So every student write their own contribution. It's like journaling, if you want. Another example where you might be using case study is for scaffolding learning. You know how you ask sometimes students, our colleagues mention something about you give the student the first assignment, you give them feedback, then they do a second submission. So a blog is a good way of maintaining this multiple version. You might use a blog for reading materials. You know how you give these reading materials in the course specification document, and mostly students don't read them because if you're not going to ask. So what you tell the students, for every reading, you need to have a blog that would, for instance, highlight the main points that you have learned. How do you feel that this, depending on what is the reading, you can relate this to a real-world example. So what you ask them to maintain is a blog about the readings that they do. So there are different multiple ways of writing, of using a blog. You can use a blog for the purpose of assessment, as I said, like a digital diary of what the student has done. And sometimes the student go and buy projects from outside. So if you ask the student to document weekly blogs, and then you randomly pick to read blog 3, week 3, and 5, and you find out, you give the student, you say, okay, but what if you do this? You want to see if the next entry, he have accommodated and integrated your feedback. Blogs are usually individual authors, so it's one student writing their own blog. You might allow the students to share so other students can read and they can comment, but it's usually administered by one person. If you wanted students to collectively create a blog, then you don't use a blog, you use an alternative which is called a wiki. It is also in your discussion in your Blackboard. In Blackboard there is something called Wikis. What are wikis? They're also websites. But instead of having one author, you have multiple authors. So it's 4 or 5 people working on creating, if you want, a small mini website. If you had a group project, you might want to actually, the final product might be a wiki. And everybody puts their contribution. And the nice thing of it, because you can see it's like Google Docs. You can see who has actually written what and who has contributed with what. So blogs and wikis are exactly the same. They're websites. The only thing, blogs have an individual author, and they're not made basically for people to they might comment and so, but that's it. A wiki is the same thing, it's a website, but instead of having one author, you might have multiple authors. As a professor, you might come and say, I'm teaching a course that has a lot of terminology, and I want to create a wiki with my students where we can build a glossary of terminology. So every student has to put at least 4 definitions with their description. And another one will put 5, and another, and you build up that glossary of terminology on a wiki. Another use where you can have, for instance, you want to use a wiki is you have a student working on a group assignments. And then every student has to contribute. So as a professor, you can see who has written what and who has contributed to what. Sorry? It's a tool inside Blackboard. If you go to activity inside Blackboard, and this is what I say, the next step from here is if there is any one of these technology you find attractive, is you have 2 ways of doing it. One, to go back to the Deanship of e-learning and say, okay, I know now about these tools. I want you to show me how to, and they're very simple to use. The how-to, so they will log you into your own system here, not, sorry, Blackboard. Or if you wanted to learn on your own, Blackboard website has small mini video clips. They're very short, simple things, 3-4 minutes. And they tell you very easily how to create a rubric, how to give audio feedback, how it's all built in, how to create an online quiz. They don't take much time because they're very short. So you only want to know about online quizzes, you go to the video of online quiz. You want to know about audio feedback, because we spoke about feedback and audio. You go, there is a short video about that. Alternatively, you might have a comprehensive training. I'm sure that the Deanship of e-learning will be willing to give that, because they're very much keen on ensuring that everybody is using Blackboard. The problem with Blackboard and Moodle and all learning management systems used in universities is that we usually use them as just uploading material and downloading. They have a lot that will help us if we actually knew. But sometimes the whole point of me talking to you about the pedagogy is that the how-to of the tool is easy. Today, nobody teaches you how to use LinkedIn or Instagram, or because they're simple, they're user-friendly interface. It's the same thing. The most difficult thing is the pedagogical integration. When to use what exactly? What is going to work with me? What are the kind of challenges I will anticipate? If I wanted to grade these things, how am I going to create a rubric? What are the kind of parameters that I will be looking into? And these are really the important things that you should ask yourself about. Now, wikis, as I said, you can use them for mini research projects. You can use them for annotated bibliographies, for instance, if you wanted students to put entries on readings and so forth. You might use it to compile a manual or a glossary. You're teaching a course in engineering, and you might want to create a manual for it. The last technology that is not inside Blackboard, you don't have it inside Blackboard, but it's a very powerful technology, and many universities are enforcing using it. In fact, in Canada, it's on the national agenda that every citizen has to maintain an e-portfolio. Now, a portfolio is not available in Blackboard. However, there is a software called Mahara, which is widely used for educational purpose. It's open source, it's free, you can download it, and you can integrate it to Blackboard. Now, one of the reasons we encourage students to use e-portfolios that are not in the LMS is that anything that happens in the LMS stays inside the LMS. But when you use an e-portfolio, sometimes the students graduate and want to take it with them. As an example, students who study architecture or computer graphics or design, when they go and apply for a job, they have to have a portfolio of their work. Nobody will hire a graphic designer who cannot show samples of logos and flyers and websites and brochures, right? So an e-portfolio can be done at a course level or at a program level. In fact, many universities who have graduate attributes, they use graduate attributes, they ask the student from the first semester to start a portfolio. And what a portfolio is, it's a digital collection of student work. So it can have videos, it can have sample of assignments, it can have letters, it can have a design they have created. It's what we call the artifacts. Now, the real value of a portfolio is not in collecting the artifacts. The real value of a portfolio is in this bit, the assessment and the reflection, which means that the student collects evidences about their learning, but then they should be able to reflect on that. Remember when I spoke to you this morning and I talked about course specification, and I said the value of a course specification is not in sampling the material and all, because that is available. Obviously, if you created it, it's there. The real value of it is in the reflection and the time you come and put your improvement and action plan, and how you implement this in the next cycle, and how do you assess the impact of the changes you have suggested. It's the same thing for the learners. Remember when we said we want to build student reflective skills in active learning? The value of a portfolio is not in them putting sample of their work. It's that the student will come and say, I did this piece of assignment, but I went wrong in this and this and this. And I am suggesting that these are the strategies that I have used. As an example, I have one of my colleagues that is using e-portfolios to teach communication skills. And what she does, she asks the students in the first session to do a 3-minute video of them presenting a topic, right? And then after 2-3 weeks, she asks the students to go back to that video based on what they've learned in the 2-3 weeks and see where do they feel that their communication skills were not good and they haven't presented the thing well. And they write that in the portfolio. So they say, this is the actions we've done. And then they ask them to go and suggest and find out resources that can help them improve their presentation skill. And then she asked them on week 5 to do a second recording. And so it's the same thing. If you gave students multiple assignments and you didn't have time to do that, you can build in peer assessment or self-assessment with an e-portfolio. You give the students do an assignment, so that's an artifact, they put it on their portfolio. You give them a rubric, they compare their work against the rubric, they put their reflection on the e-portfolio, you can give them feedback on it, they do a second submission, and they show how the improvement happens. E-portfolios are a very powerful tool, but they are not the first technology you should be using. Because yes, it's a portfolio. Yes, it is. LinkedIn, by the way, a lot of people professionally keep a portfolio. It's not only for educational purposes. That's why, مثلا, universities, they say a student in computer graphics will build up a portfolio, and when they graduate, they take it with them. Because to the employer, it's evidence of their capabilities and their skills. Exactly. So these are examples of some e-portfolio tools that are free. You can download them for free, and they can all be integrated with Blackboard, Moodle, and so forth. This is an example of how a portfolio looks. It's like a website. So this is from Auburn University. It's a student maintaining a portfolio. He's an engineering student, and he's actually talking about how he developed his communication leadership skills. So he's reflecting on courses he has taken. He's reflecting on internship. He's reflecting. One of the best uses for an e-portfolio is the internship experience that you give to students. Students go to the work field. They spend 4 or 5 hours a day, and then they come back, they document what they have done, they put evidence, they put maybe a letter from their supervisor as an evidence, maybe minutes of meeting, maybe it's a piece of work they produce. They talk about the challenges that they faced, how they felt that the study did not really help them, that, for instance, we were exposed to this and this, but I didn't know about managing conflict. Sorry? Obviously, you can have the help of the university. You can have a professor who wants to go the extra mile and do them. I know lots of universities that they don't have any portfolio at an institutional level, but the professor decided to go and integrate this way because they found it useful. It's a way of documenting student experience. Now, obviously, there are other technologies that are not part of and which you cannot use on your own, like simulations, Second Life. They're expensive technologies, but in some disciplines, you actually need to use them. And I'm just going to conclude with this short video about somebody teaching a course on occupational health and safety.
Second Life is an online virtual world where users can interact, create, collaborate and socialize. It is often used in education to facilitate role-playing activities or scenario-based learning that can't be achieved in the real world. Simon Keir is keeper of the Media Zoo at the University of Leicester in the UK. Simon explains how Second Life was used to help students generate an emergency evacuation plan for an oil rig as part of their study in a fully online Master of Occupational Psychology. Simon outlines the technical considerations of teaching in virtual worlds and explains their potential in the future of education.
It was all part of the Duckling project, and it was the MSc in occupational psychology. The aim of the scenario on the oil rig in Second Life was to give the students a more collaborative and immersive learning experience. Second Life is a 3D virtual environment, and it's a place that doesn't exist, which is the way I like to think of it, and yet it's so real. As an avatar, you can choose pretty much anything you want. You choose your appearance, you choose the way you want to be encountered in Second Life. We were going through possible artifacts that could serve their purpose. We came across this wonderful, wonderful oil rig, which had huge potential. It was big, it was open, very well built, and that's what we focused on. As it's an oil rig, I put up some workshops with some functioning artifacts within, which gives a little bit of interactivity to the students. It's an environment that is not in no way could it be incorporated in the real world. There's no way you can afford to go to an oil rig, there's no way you'll be allowed on an oil rig. Okay, it's a virtual oil rig, and it's not exactly the same as a real oil rig, but you do still have the same principles, you still have the same idea. They had two purposes when they came on this rig: to work together as a health and safety team and to develop an evacuation plan. I went around and I laid burning barrels, blocked off stairwells, blocked off doors, and set fire to the rig. And then once everything was ready, I pressed the klaxons and at the same time typed into the chat box, evacuate, evacuate. Well, I also had my mic on, so I was saying evacuate, evacuate.
This is an emergency. This is an emergency. Please make for stairwell 1. Stairwell 1. Please make your way to the embarkation point at the boats. Stairwell 1. Just wait there, please. Well done, Maris.
Wait for me!
Now all the blue helmets are safe.
In terms of how the learners responded to this experience, they responded very positively. The students said they found it very enjoyable, but also quite realistic, with the klaxons going off, having to move quickly, people saying evacuate, evacuate. And it did give them a feeling, although it was in world as avatars, it did give them a feeling that perhaps, well, definitely they would not have got off paper just reading about it. We lost possibly 30% of the volunteer participants on the project simply through being unable to access Second Life through their hardware or through their bandwidth, or the network collapsing while they were in world. So it was a demanding technology. The ones that did get in did find it very beneficial. If you're a lecturer perhaps interested in using Second Life, I think you would need some help from someone more experienced. The good thing is there's a lot of experienced people out there. The two main technical challenges are bandwidth. It's a bandwidth-hungry technology. When you're in world, it requires a lot of broadband. The second major technical challenge is you need good hardware. The costs of working in Second Life are not considerable. If you own an island, which is where you need to develop your projects, it's about $1,000 a month. And then I think it's about $300 a month just to maintain it. To set up a client, an avatar in Second Life is free. So it doesn't matter to the student or the number of students you have, because they can all register for free. In terms of pedagogy within Second Life, it's very similar, if not the same, as the Salmon 5-stage model, where the same 5-stage structure has been applied to the virtual world. We felt, or the psychologists felt, that perhaps if they were working together in a collaborative environment, actually learning from each other, it would actually improve their learning experience. It's about applying the principles they learn on their course in a specific environment. As an educational tool, it's fantastic and its potential is huge once these technological challenges are overcome. So what I would say is take a punt and have a go, but think of it in 10 years' time. Think of it in 15 years' time. Think of 100 meg broadband speeds and an expectation from the learner that they're moving away from a lecture scenario to a passive recipient scenario, and that slotting into avatar's clothes and going to do some learning for half an hour is not that unrealistic. If you can learn, if you can undertake learning in the virtual world that perhaps there are barriers to in the real world, then that's got to be a significant advantage.
Just before we wrap up, this is actually a list of the different activities and the kind of tools that you wanted to use. Like 1 minute paper, online quiz on Blackboard, role playing or structured debate. You can use actually discussion forum. Journaling or collaborative writing, you can use a wiki. So it's really just, you're not thinking about the tool. When you're thinking, you're all thinking about what you want to develop in students. Then you think about what technology will help you. So what's this actually? It's using role playing in Second Life. So the objective and the outcome he wanted to achieve was to get the students to work on evacuation plans based on real life scenarios. So he created situations for students to put, and it's part of a health and occupational safety. There are now a lot of less expensive applications that you can buy in different fields that could be used. Now, obviously, this brings us to the end of our workshop.